The main shock, the part people still whisper about, is that the maid didn't just embarrass a rich man with a tango. She later proved she could wipe out his whole business with one call. But that night, in the first few minutes, nobody knew any of that. They only knew a rich man had made a cruel promise in front of a room full of guests, and a quiet woman in a plain uniform was about to answer him in a way no one expected. It happened in a glass house on a hill in Aspen, Colorado, America. Snow pressed against the windows like white dust, and the lights inside made the place glow from far away. The owner loved showing off the view, the clean lines, the wide rooms, and the shiny floor that reflected people's shoes like a mirror. A long table held small plates and tall glasses, and a band in the corner played soft music that sounded expensive just because it was played live. The guests spoke in smooth voices, the way people do when they want to sound important, and the air carried the smell of perfume, steak, and firewood from the giant stone fireplace. The man hosting the party was Graham Whitlock. He was the kind of man who smiled without warmth, the kind who shook hands like he was doing someone a favor. His suit fit him perfectly, and he wore a watch that looked like it cost more than most cars. He liked people to know he had money, and he liked even more that they wanted something from him. When he spoke, others leaned in, as if his words were worth saving. He was loud, sure of himself, and proud of the number he liked to say out loud. He told anyone who would listen that he was worth about $40 million, as if a person could be measured like that. The maid that night moved through the room like a shadow with steady steps. Her name tag said Nora, and that was all the guests thought they needed to know. She carried a tray with glasses and small bites, and she kept her eyes low. She didn't fight for attention, she didn't laugh at the jokes. She did her work quietly and clean. Some people barely saw her. Some saw her only as part of the house, like the walls or the lights. And a few saw her the way Graham did, like someone safe to mock because she couldn't fight back. 3 women near the fireplace were dressed in bright colors that shone in the glass walls: Elaine, Marcy, and Vivian. They talked about vacations and parties in other cities in America, and they laughed too loudly when Graham looked their way. A group of men stood by the bar, Derek, Paul, and Jonah, watching everything like it was a game. They weren't close friends, not really. They were the kind of people who gathered around money and hoped some of it would splash onto them. You could see it in their eyes when Graham spoke. You could hear it in their short, eager laughs. At some point, Graham noticed Nora passing behind him. He turned in a smooth, careless way, like he was turning toward a waiter. He looked her up and down, not in a private way, but in a public one, like he wanted the whole room to join in. Then he smiled and said, "Dance the tango, and I'll marry you." He said it like a joke, like it was a funny prize he could hand out whenever he wanted. For a moment, the room held its breath, then laughter broke out in sharp little pieces. Elaine covered her mouth as if she was shocked, but her eyes shone with interest. Marcy nudged Vivian, and Vivian's laugh sounded like a bell, light and cold. Derek lifted his drink as if to toast the moment. Paul smirked and looked around to see who else was watching. Jonah leaned forward, excited, as if he'd just been offered a free show. It wasn't just the words that were cruel. It was the way everyone acted like cruelty was entertainment. Nora stopped. She didn't spill anything, and she didn't rush away. She looked at Graham, and her face stayed calm. "No," she said, soft but clear. That one word should have ended it. But men like Graham don't like hearing no, especially in front of other people. Graham leaned closer, loud enough for the whole room. "A maid who can't even entertain?" He said, "You want a better life, don't you? I'm worth $40 million. One dance and you're saved." The way he said saved was the worst part, like he was doing her a kindness, like she was drowning and he was tossing her a rope. He wanted her to feel small. He wanted her to beg. He wanted the room to see him win. The band, unsure but watching Graham, let the music fade. Then someone, maybe Derek, maybe Jonah, called out, "Play something for a tango." A few guests clapped. The band started a new song, slow and sharp, with a steady beat that made the floor feel like a stage. The room shifted, like people were moving into seats at a theater. Phones appeared in hands. Smiles tightened. The whole house seemed to turn toward Nora, as if she had been pushed into a spotlight. Nora looked down at the tray she held. She set it on a side table with careful hands. Nothing shook. No glass rattled. She didn't ask anyone to stop. She didn't plead. She took a breath, as if she was stepping into cold water, and then she walked onto the open floor. At first, Graham's face held that smug look, the one that said he had already won. But the moment Nora placed her feet, something changed. Her posture straightened, not like a worker trying to stand tall, but like someone trained. She lifted her chin slightly and her eyes focused, not on Graham's money, not on the crowd, but on the space and the rhythm, and then she began. It wasn't cute and it wasn't clumsy. It was clean and sharp, like someone who had practiced 1,000 times when no one was watching. Her steps cut across the marble in perfect timing. Her turns were smooth and strong. Her arms moved with control, not waving, not guessing. The tango looked like it belonged to her, like she was speaking a language the rest of the room had only heard about. The band members glanced at each other, surprised, and then played better, as if her dancing demanded more from them. The laughter died so fast it felt like a door had slammed. Elaine lowered her hand from her mouth and just stared. Marcy's smile fell away. Vivian blinked, as if her eyes didn't believe what they were seeing. Derek's drink stopped halfway to his lips. Paul's smirk melted into confusion. Jonah whispered, "No way," but he didn't look away. Even the fire in the fireplace seemed quieter, like it was listening too. Graham's smile faded. His eyes widened like he'd seen a ghost. He took a step forward and then stopped, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to move. The room that had been on his side only a minute ago was no longer his. Every person there was watching Nora, and the attention he loved had slipped out of his hands. When the music ended, the silence was heavy. A woman near the fireplace whispered, "That's not a maid." Someone else, louder, said, "He promised," and then voices rose fast, bouncing off the glass walls. "You said you'd marry her. A deal is a deal." "You can't say that and take it back." Graham snapped. "I didn't mean it. It was a joke." He tried to laugh, but it sounded weak, like a lie he didn't fully believe himself. He wanted to pull the words back, to make everyone forget. But the room had already decided the moment mattered. Nora let out a small laugh just once, and it wasn't sweet. It was the kind of laugh that says, "You have no idea who you're talking to." "I don't need your money," she said, and her voice carried without shouting. "And if I want, I can destroy your business." Graham's face turned hard with fear under the anger. He shouted, "This cannot be." The words flew out like he was trying to scare the truth away. Nora didn't flinch. She looked past him, toward the far wall where the house manager stood, stiff and careful. "Mr. Harlan," she called. The manager froze. Nora's eyes stayed calm, and her tone was steady, like she was asking for something simple. "Tell him my real name." The next part of that night is the piece people repeat with a low voice, because it was the moment the room changed sides. The shock wasn't only that Nora danced like a pro. The real shock was the name that came after the dance, the name that made the house manager look like he might faint. After Nora called out, "Mr. Harlan," the air in the glass house felt tight. The music had stopped, but the last beat still seemed to hang in the room. Phones were held in the air and then slowly lowered, like people suddenly remembered they were filming a real person, not a joke. The guests stood in small groups, but no one moved much. They were waiting, the way people wait when they feel a storm is coming but can't see it yet. Harlan Reed, the house manager, had been standing near a back hallway where the lights were dimmer. He was a tall man with neat hair and the careful posture of someone who spends his life cleaning up other people's messes. He had a clipboard earlier, then no clipboard, then nothing in his hands at all, as if he didn't know what to do with them. When Nora called him, he didn't answer right away. He blinked once, then twice, like he hoped he had imagined it. But she was looking straight at him. The room was looking at him too. He walked forward slowly, as if his shoes had turned to stone. Each step felt loud on the marble. His face went pale, not from anger, not from offense, but from fear. Not the fear of being fired, a deeper kind. The fear of standing between a powerful truth and a foolish man who didn't know what he had started. Graham Whitlock's voice cut through the silence. "What is this?" He barked. His cheeks were red, his pride bruised. He pointed at Nora like she was an object that didn't work the way he expected. "Who are you?" he demanded, and his tone said he believed he was still in charge. Nora didn't answer him. That was the strange part. A lot of people expected her to explain, to defend herself, to beg for peace. But she didn't. She only looked at Harlan, calm and steady, as if Graham was background noise. Harlan swallowed. His throat moved hard. "Miss, please," he whispered, and the word "miss" sounded wrong in his mouth. Like he had been trained to say it but never expected to say it to her. His eyes flicked to Graham and back to Nora, as if he was asking permission to speak without making everything worse. Nora's voice was low, almost gentle. "Tell him," she said again. "My real name." A few guests shifted. Someone's bracelet clinked. The fire cracked in the fireplace. Elaine, near the hearth, leaned forward without noticing. Marcy's mouth was slightly open. Vivian's smile had disappeared completely. Derek glanced at Paul, as if he wanted a signal for how to react, but Paul's face had tightened into a blank mask. Jonah looked eager and scared at the same time, like he was watching a door open to a room he wasn't meant to enter. Harlan took another breath, and his hands trembled at his sides. Then Nora spoke first, quiet but heavy, as a stone dropped into deep water. "Noel Archer." The name didn't sound fancy, it didn't sparkle. It didn't need to. It landed in the room and made everything else feel small. Harlan's eyes filled with fear, not of trouble, of truth. He turned to Graham and shook his head slowly, as if trying to warn him without words. Then he spoke, and his voice came out thin and shaking. "Sir," Harlan said, "that isn't a maid. That is Noel Archer." Graham blinked once, then laughed once. Sharp and short. "That's impossible," he snapped. But the laugh didn't carry confidence. It carried panic, the way a person laughs when they want to push away something they can't control. Harlan kept going, almost choking on the words, because now that he had started, he had to finish. "She owns the Archer Group," he said. "The hotels, the shipping lines, the tech parks, the investment offices, the whole empire." A murmur rolled through the guests, like wind sliding over ice. A man in a gray suit near the window whispered, "I know that name." A woman by the bar gasped, "Noel Archer?" And her hand went to her chest. Someone else said, "That's billions." But they didn't say it loud, like saying it out loud might invite trouble. Graham's face changed in fast steps, confusion, anger, then fear. "You're lying," he said to Harlan. "Why would you say that? Why would she be here in my house carrying trays?" He turned to Nora as if he could force the truth to bend. "You think this is funny?" he said. "Is this some trick?" Nora finally looked at him. Her expression wasn't proud. It wasn't cruel. It was tired, like she had seen this kind of man before. "It isn't a trick," she said. "It's a lesson." Graham's voice cracked, just a little, and he hated that it did. "If you're so rich," he said, "why are you here? Why would anyone do that?" Harlan, still trembling, answered like he had memorized the story from careful whispers. "Her father built the empire," he said, "but she refused that life. She walked away. She didn't want the parties, the meetings, the people who smiled for money. She doesn't like being rich. She doesn't like what it does to people." He paused, then added, "She works in other people's houses because she wants simple days, quiet work, real space. She wants to be treated like a person." That last line made the room feel even colder. Because it wasn't just about Nora, it was about everyone there and how they had treated her. Graham stared at her as if he was seeing her for the first time. His eyes darted around the room, looking for someone to help him, someone to laugh and say it was all fake. But no one did. Elaine looked down at her shoes. Marcy's face had gone tight with shame. Vivian kept blinking fast, like she wanted to wake up. Derek swallowed and took a step back, putting distance between himself and the moment. Paul lifted his drink, then set it down without sipping. Jonah's phone was still in his hand, but now he was holding it like it might burn him. Graham tried to recover. He pulled his shoulders back and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Noel," he said, using the name as if it were a key that would open a safer door. "Listen, we can talk." "Maybe we can—" Nora raised one finger, stopping him like he was a child interrupting a grown person. The gesture was small, but it held the whole room. "No," she said. "Simple. Final. Now you learn." And in that glass house in Aspen, with snow pressing against the windows and the fire snapping behind them, a man who thought money made him untouchable realized, for the first time, that he had been laughing at the wrong person. The third part is the one that made people stop thinking it was just a party problem. Until then, it was shame, it was gossip, it was a rich man getting caught being cruel. But chapter 3 is when the room realized this wasn't a story about feelings. It was about power and how quickly it can move when it finally decides to move. After Harlan said the name Noel Archer, Graham Whitlock still looked like he wanted to fight reality. He stood stiff, jaw tight, eyes sharp, as anger could protect him. He kept trying to talk, trying to steer the moment back into a place where he knew the rules. He smiled in a broken way and said things like, Let's be calm, and we can fix this. And it was only a joke, but nobody laughed anymore. The same people who had clapped for the tango now stared at the floor or stared at Noelle like they were looking at a cliff edge. Noelle didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten anyone with big speeches. She didn't insult Graham the way he had insulted her. She simply stood there, in that plain uniform, and the quiet around her felt stronger than the music ever had. The glass walls showed their reflections from every angle: expensive suits, bright dresses, and one maid who suddenly didn't feel like a maid at all. Then Noelle reached into the front pocket of her apron and pulled out a phone. It looked plain. No glitter. No fancy case, but the way she held it made the room feel smaller. People leaned in without meaning to, as if the phone was a candle and they were drawn toward the flame. Even the ones pretending to be uninterested were listening. You could see it in the way their shoulders turned. You could see it in the way their breathing slowed. She stepped away from the center of the room, not because she was afraid, but because she was making space. She moved toward a quieter corner near the hallway, where the light was softer. The fireplace kept popping behind the guests, and outside the windows, the snow kept falling, calm and steady, like nothing in the world had changed. Noelle lifted the phone to her ear. "Hello," she said, a pause. "This is Noelle Archer." That was all it took. No fancy introduction. No request to speak to a manager. Just her name. It landed like a stamp on paper. Another pause. "Yes," she said, calm. "I'm at a private event." She listened again. The room held still. Even Graham stopped moving, like his body understood that interrupting now would make him look even weaker. Then Noelle spoke, slow and clear, with words so simple they sounded almost polite. "I want every contract tied to Whitlock Holdings reviewed and ended. Tonight." Graham surged forward like he had been stung. "You can't do that!" he shouted. His voice echoed off the glass walls, too loud, too desperate. A few guests flinched. Someone near the bar dropped a small fork onto a plate, and the tiny sound felt huge. Noelle didn't even look at him. She turned her face slightly away, continuing the call as if she were placing an ordinary order. "End the hotel supply chain deal," she said. "Cancel the insurance backing. Stop the shipping credit. Cut the lease support in Denver. Every agreement. Every line." When she said Denver, people glanced at each other because it sounded specific. It sounded real. It didn't sound like a threat from a movie. It sounded like someone who knew exactly where the wires were and how to pull them. Graham's face changed in steps. First anger, red and loud. Then fear, pale and quiet. Then something worse. The moment a man understands the ground is gone, and he is standing over a drop. His mouth opened as if to speak again, but no words came out. It was like watching a door close slowly in front of him. Near the far side of the room, Graham's assistant Trent Maddox pulled out his own phone. Trent had been hovering all night, smiling at anyone who mattered and ignoring anyone who didn't. But now his hands moved fast. His thumbs tapped hard on the screen. His eyes widened more with every second, like the phone was showing him a fire spreading across a map. "Graham," Trent whispered, and the whisper somehow cut through the silence better than shouting. "I'm getting alerts. Banks are calling. Partners are backing out." Graham spun toward him. "What are you talking about?" He snapped, but his voice didn't sound like a boss anymore. It sounded like a person asking for air. Trent swallowed. "A lender just sent a notice," he said. "And the insurance group, there's an email. And the shipping line." He stopped, because he didn't want to say it in front of everyone, but everyone was listening anyway. "They're pulling support," he finished, barely audible. Across the room, Elaine grabbed Marcy's wrist so hard it left a mark. "Is this real?" she whispered, eyes wide. Marcy nodded slowly, like she didn't want it to be true. Vivian stood with both hands pressed together at her waist, staring at Noelle's apron like the pocket might produce a second storm. Derek took a slow step backward, as if distance could protect him. Paul's face had gone flat and tight, the look of a man calculating how to escape without being seen as a coward. Jonah, still holding his phone, lowered it all the way down, as if recording this now felt dangerous. A man named Caleb, someone from Dallas, someone who had been quiet all night, murmured under his breath, "This is what power looks like." He didn't say it with joy. He said it like a warning, as he had just watched a knife slide out of its sheath. Noelle listened for a final moment, then said, "Thank you." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her apron as if she had only ordered a cup of tea. That calm movement shook people more than shouting ever could. It told them she wasn't acting, she wasn't trying to scare him. She was simply doing what she said she could do. Graham's breath came fast. He looked around at the guests, hoping someone would step in, hoping laughter would return and make this lighter. But nobody moved. The room had turned into a courtroom, and he was standing alone. "You're ruining me over a dance?" he said, voice cracking at the edges. Noelle finally faced him fully. Her eyes were steady, not wild. Her voice stayed simple. "No," she said. "You did that. The dance only showed everyone who you are." And right there, in that glass house in Aspen, people understood the difference between money and control. Graham had money, and he used it like a whip. Noelle had control, and she used it like a mirror. She didn't hit him. She let him see himself, and then she let the world respond. The party music never came back. It was like the house itself refused to pretend everything was fine. The glass walls still showed the snow outside, bright and calm, but inside the air felt sharp and cold. People stood in small groups without speaking, like they were afraid the wrong word might make things worse. The fire still burned in the fireplace, yet the room felt colder than the winter beyond the windows. Graham Whitlock tried to hold his posture, but it didn't work anymore. He took 2 steps back, then forward, like he couldn't find a safe spot to stand. His eyes searched the faces around him, looking for help, looking for a friend, looking for anyone who would laugh and turn this into a joke again. But people looked away. Elaine stared at the floor. Marcy held her own hands tight at her waist. Vivian's lips were pressed together as if she were biting back words. Derek suddenly looked interested in the ice outside. Paul's face was blank, and Jonah stood very still, like a person caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Trent Maddox kept glancing down at his phone. Every few seconds, his screen lit up again. His shoulders were stiff, and his mouth stayed slightly open, as if he had forgotten how to close it. Harlan Reed stood near the hallway, careful and quiet, watching like a man who knew this moment would be remembered for years. And Caleb, the quiet guest from Dallas, said nothing now. He only watched Graham with the look of someone who understands what a fall sounds like before it finishes. Graham's breathing became loud in the silence. He looked at Noelle Archer still in her maid uniform, still calm, still holding the room without trying. His pride fought inside him for another second. Then it broke. He dropped to his knees on the marble floor. The sound wasn't dramatic, just heavy. It made a few people flinch, not because they cared about him, but because it was the clearest sign that the night had passed a point of no return. "I'm sorry," Graham said. His voice came out rough. "Please. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." Noelle looked down at him without smiling. There was no joy in his pain, no thrill in watching him beg. Her face held only a hard calm, like someone who has already decided what is right and doesn't need to be loud about it. "You didn't need to know," she said. "You should have been kind anyway." Graham lifted his hand as if to touch hers, then stopped himself. His voice cracked. "I'll pay you," he said. £200,000, $500,000, whatever you want. Noelle shook her head once. "I don't want your money." Harlan stepped closer, careful, as if he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "Miss Archer," he said softly. "Should I?" "No," Noelle said. "Let him live with it." Then she walked back to the side table and picked up her tray, the same tray she had set down before the tango. That simple act cut deeper than any insult. It showed how easy it was for her to be humble, and how hard it had been for them to be human. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to punish him with her hands. The world was already doing it. As Noelle walked out of that glass house in Aspen, no one stopped her. The guests stayed frozen in place, trapped in their own shame. And Graham stayed on the marble floor, staring at the space where she had been, as if the room had stolen something from him he couldn't buy back. By morning, the story spread from Chicago to Miami to Seattle, not as party gossip, but as a warning. A man thought he could buy a person with a joke, and a woman who chose a simple life reminded everyone that real power doesn't always wear a suit.